Greetings. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant podcast. Mrs. R Relevant is your daily draft podcast. During the college football season, we will highlight draftable players which match up. Our goal is to cover the draftables. That is the players 1 to 400 on our initial big boards, hoping to show which players are improving draft stock before the Senior Bowl kicks off draft season. Standard disclaimer. The players discussed in this podcast have not declared for the draft, and draft boards are in constant fluctuation until players declare in January. This podcast is meant to be a discussion. It is not a declaration that any of these players are entering the NFL draft. So for episode 3, week 1, 2024, we're going to talk about Notre Dame and Texas A&M. This is one of the matchups this week with 2 ranked teams, and you can see there's a reason these teams are ranked. This is a much longer list than the first 2 podcasts we have recorded. So let's talk about a couple of the players at the top. So you're going to be seeing Benjamin Morrison, cornerback from Notre Dame, matched up against wide receiver Moose Muhammad III from Texas A&M. Or Noah Thomas from Texas A&M. So pretty much no matter which wide receiver Morrison is matching up with, that's going to be a player that is likely drafted. Okay. And you could then even add that to Riley Leonard, the quarterback from Notre Dame, also matching up against those DBs, as well as safety Bryce Anderson from Texas A&M. And Jacoby Matthews from Texas A&M. So we definitely have a, matchups, whether no matter which offense or defense is lining up. But definitely seeing a quarterback go up against safeties and linebackers is something I like to point out. There is a debate right now as to who is QB1 in this class. Riley Leonard, from a grading standpoint, right now I have inside the top 100. And from a measurables perspective, Leonard putting on a good season could put him in as QB1 or a day 1 quarterback. Okay. Couple of other matchups to look at. Okay. So we have Nick Scorton. Okay. He is the highest ranked player on the board from either of the 2 teams, the edge from Texas A&M. Okay. And he's going to be matching up against Tosh Baker, offensive tackle from Notre Dame. So here's a couple of things to think about. This is not going to be a strong offensive tackle class. So anytime that we have an edge matched up against an offensive tackle, regardless of where the offensive tackle is ranked, there's just not going to be many tackles that are going to be drafted this year. Last year was a historically good tackle class. This year, that's going to drop a little bit. So Tosh Baker, definitely have a draftable grade on him as a left or right tackle from Notre Dame. Okay. He will be matched up at times against Nick Scorton, who could be the first overall player selected in the draft. I have seen at least 2 people that have Scorton as edge 1. On the board that I'm looking at, he is not edge 1, but he's closer to edge 1 than he is edge 5, right? So that's definitely a matchup we would want to look at. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of the offensive tackle. Which offensive tackles in this draft class ascend, because it's a very important position. They tend to get picked in the top 100. Even if you're reaching for them, they're going to be picked in the top 100 just based upon positional importance, right? You're likely going to take a flyer on a 3rd round offensive tackle, even if they're a project, just because you need the position. I flash back to Buffalo doing that with Spencer Brown 4 years ago, for example. And that pick has paid dividends for the Buffalo Bills. Okay, so let's look at a couple of the other matchups. So if you look, we have Connor Weigman, a quarterback from Texas A&M. And right now, my grade on him, he's in the top 50. And again, I've seen people that say Weigman is QB1 in this class. So again, he has the chance to put a really good foot forward and give himself a day one grade and or a top 10 draft grade. And the matchups I would be looking at there would be Weigman, quarterback from Texas A&M, against safety Xavier Watts and linebacker Jack Kaiser in Notre Dame. So a quarterback safety matchup is definitely something that I would look at. Okay. And then if we look on the flip side of that, we talked about Morrison a little bit. We also have Clarence Lewis, another cornerback from Notre Dame, and Moose Muhammad, wide receiver, Noah Thomas, wide receiver. So we have two corners matched up against two wide receivers. Definitely a matchup I would look at. In addition to that, Ruben Feathertree, offensive tackle from Texas A&M, and Trey Zune, offensive tackle from Texas A&M. So Notre Dame has edge RJ Oben. This is going to be a really strong edge class. So right now, the grade that I have on Oben is a top 100 grade. So Oben playing is going to be going against, again, offensive tackles that are likely going to be drafted. So right now, I both have Feathertree and Zune well inside the top 150. Okay, do either of those offensive tackles show enough to give themselves a day two grade? Because this class, like I said, is going to be hurting for offensive tackles. So if your favorite NFL team needs a tackle, you're probably going to be doing mock drafts and trying to say, okay, which tackles do we like in the mid to late round? Okay. We have a couple of other matchups that could be of interest. So Billy Shorroth, the guard from Notre Dame, okay, the grade on him isn't what I would consider draftable. He's well outside the top 300. However, there are some defensive linemen, including Shamar Turner, Rodis Johnson, and Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M that he would be matched up against. So he could improve his draft stock simply by a good showing against three likely standout defensive linemen from Texas A&M. Okay. In addition to that, we can look at Riley Mills, the defensive lineman from Notre Dame, the interior defensive lineman, also going up against Feathertree and Zune. Okay. We also have Mitchell Evans, tight end from Notre Dame. Okay. And he could be matched up against Bryce Anderson or Jacoby Matthews, the safeties from Texas A&M. So that's definitely a matchup I would look at for several reasons. If just to give you a little bit of preview of the draft class, this is going to be a really strong year for defense, specifically defensive backs. So when you're looking at, for example, Will Lee at cornerback or Tyreek Chappelle at cornerback from Texas A&M, okay, no wide receivers from Notre Dame are entering the draftable conversation. But look for where the cornerbacks stand out. This is also going to be a safety class where there's going to be a lot taken in the top 100. I'm not going to say it's a deep safety class, but with initial grades, there's probably going to be between 5 and 10 safeties. Probably not 10, but we're going to be above 5 safeties taken in the top 100. So that's something to keep in mind. So when you're looking at safeties like Bryce Anderson and Jacoby Matthews, they're going to be playing against a quarterback that's going to be drafted high. How do those safeties match up against the quarterback? Then we have the flip matchup, which would be Xavier Watts at safety against Connor Weigman at quarterback as well. So definitely a lot of intriguing draftable matchups, Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. So my name is Jim. You can follow me on X at NFL Draft Fanatic. There is no I in Fanatic on my Twitter handle. NFL Draft Fanatics is the home of the only interactive mock draft simulator. That means that fans rate the players, fans control the big board by the mock drafts that they do. Okay. Remember, every day is draft day if you have the right attitude. My name is Jim with NFL Draft Fanatics, and this has been episode 3 of the Mrs. R Relevant podcast. Thank you very much.